This narrative is laden with startling revelations, truths I've buried for far too long. I'm sharing it now because I must, because the weight of guilt has become unbearable. If I don't reveal it, it will utterly consume me. Before continuing, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support means more than words can express, and many captivating stories await you. Life often presents places that appear mundane at first glance, calm, familiar, seemingly safe. Yet some places possess a distinct energy, a silent presence that you sense even before stepping through the door. Clara's house, nestled amidst the rolling countryside, was one such place. I didn't perceive it immediately. It was only in hindsight, in moments of quiet reflection, that I realized the pieces had started to fall into place the instant my car tires crunched on the gravel driveway. The air was warm, almost stifling, and the stillness of the landscape felt unnatural, as though the world itself was holding its breath. When Clara greeted me at the door, her smile was bright, and her voice brimmed with warmth, yet her gaze lingered on me a fraction too long. She pulled me into an embrace, soft, enveloping, carrying a faint scent of lavender mingled with vanilla or freshly baked bread. For a fleeting moment, the day's strangeness melted away, and I allowed myself to relax in the comfort of her welcome. "He's at the hospital," she said, preemptively answering the unasked question about her husband, Michael. A doctor with a demanding schedule, Michael was rarely home. Without him, the house felt larger, emptier. Jade's laughter broke through the moment, grounding it in normalcy. But nothing was ordinary that summer. Not my decisions, not the events that unfolded, and certainly not the secrets I've carried since stepping out of the car that day. I believed I was visiting my aunt for a quiet summer in the countryside. I couldn't have been more mistaken. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the room in golden streaks, illuminating the day with a clarity I hadn't felt in ages. Clara was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, humming softly. "How about some time in the garden today?" she asked, pouring me a cup of tea. I nodded, eager to spend the day outside. The garden was like a scene from a storybook. Rows of vibrant flowers, neatly trimmed hedges, and patches of freshly turned soil awaiting seeds. Clara handed me gloves, her fingers brushing mine briefly. It was a small gesture, yet it made me acutely aware of our proximity. "You've always been so talented at this," I remarked, watching her work the soil with practiced ease. She glanced up with a smile, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Thanks. It's more than a garden to me. It's my sanctuary, where I can think and breathe." Her tone carried a quiet depth that piqued my curiosity, but I refrained from prying. We settled into a rhythm, conversing sporadically about lighthearted topics, Jade's antics, changes in town, Michael's long hours. Yet, every so often, her eyes would catch mine, her voice softening as though searching for unspoken words. As the afternoon wore on, Clara reached to hand me a trowel, but the damp ground shifted beneath her. She stumbled, and instinctively I grabbed her arm to steady her. For a moment, we were frozen in place. Her expression flickered. Was it surprise, gratitude, or something else entirely? I couldn't tell. "Thanks," she murmured, stepping back quickly. The rest of the day passed without incident, yet something had shifted. The air felt charged with an unspoken tension. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the moment. Her voice, her expression, the warmth of her arm beneath my hand. Something had begun, though I didn't know where it would lead. I sat quietly, free from the endless stream of thoughts that usually flooded my mind. I glanced at her, but her eyes were fixed on the screen, though her mind seemed miles away. "You deserve this. A moment to simply exist," I said, surprised by the sincerity in my voice. She turned toward me, her eyes meeting mine. There was something in her expression, something fragile, almost searching. Without thinking, I leaned in slightly, testing the waters. Then it happened. Her lips touched mine, soft and warm. A kiss that carried no uncertainty, only a quiet acknowledgement of something inevitable. When she pulled back, she didn't retreat far. Instead, she gazed at me, her face mere inches away. Slowly, she moved closer, resting her head against mine and wrapping her hand around my arm as though anchoring herself. The movie continued, but it was as though neither of us cared. The world outside the room felt distant, insignificant. All that mattered was the silence between us and the unspoken truths it held. That night, something irreversible began, and I couldn't help but wonder where it would lead. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a golden glow across the countertop where Clara stood slicing vegetables. The rhythmic sound of her knife on the cutting board broke the quiet, accompanied only by the faint hum of the coffee maker. I was setting the table, arranging dishes and cups, my mind replaying the events of the previous night. We hadn't spoken of it yet, but the silence between us carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Clara reached for something on the top shelf, a jar of spices perhaps, but her height wasn't enough. "Let me help," I offered, stepping closer. As I handed her the jar, our faces came close. The air felt charged, electric, heavy with something unnamed but undeniably present. I don't know who moved first. One moment we were still, the next her lips were on mine. The kiss was brief but intense, a spark that ignited something we couldn't deny. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide, her breathing uneven. "We shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't stop thinking about it. About you," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Without a word, she pulled me closer, and we kissed again, the world around us forgotten. Her husband's neglect had starved her of everything, and in that moment, we crossed a line. Later, she looked at me, her expression torn between determination and something deeper. Then, she turned back to the counter, her hands unsteady as she resumed chopping, leaving the moment suspended between us like an unanswered question. Silence can be louder than words, and that morning, after her husband left for work, the quiet in the house felt suffocating, as though trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. When the rain came, heavy and relentless, Clara and I found ourselves in the living room, sheltered from the storm. She sat on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, her gaze distant. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, but it wasn't enough to chase away the chill that seemed to seep in with the storm. "You're cold," I said, grabbing the folded blanket from the armrest. I draped it over her shoulders, and as I sat beside her, she pulled the fabric closer. Her hand brushed mine, the warmth lingering long after the touch. "I'm glad you're here, Gomez," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. "I've missed having someone to talk to like this." "I feel the same way, Aunt Clara," I replied, the weight of my words sinking in. Before I realized it, the space between us vanished, and her lips met mine again, this time unplanned but undeniably real. When the kiss ended, she stayed close, her eyes searching mine as if to say everything she couldn't put into words. And now I ask you, the viewer, what would you do in this situation? If you were her husband and discovered this, how would you respond? Would you try to save the relationship, or is such betrayal unforgivable? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories exploring the crossroads of emotions, decisions, and consequences.